The rational skeptics often say that, since there's no scientific evidence for God, and the God proposition is unfalsifiable, we should dismiss the claim that God exists out of hand, as irrational and unscientific. Let's grant them for the sake of argument that there is no scientific evidence for God. Let's grant them for the sake of argument that the God proposition is unfalsifiable. So what? There's no evidence that life exists elsewhere in the universe, and that claim is also unfalsifiable. But we still think it's rational and even scientific to believe in life on other planets, because we know a great deal about chemistry, and we know a great deal about statistics, and about the sheer number of planets in the universe, and taken together we can calculate the likelihood of extraterrestrial life, and we find that that probability is quite high. So we can use theoretical science to calculate the probability of an experimental outcome before the experiment is performed. We call this the prior probability, and we can calculate these probabilities even when the experiment is not currently possible, or indeed even principally possible. We can likewise use theoretical science, math, and some philosophical reasoning to calculate the prior probability of God's existence. And if the probability of God's existence exceeds the probability of his non-existence, well, then it would be reasonable to believe in that God, and it could even be scientific. Firstly, we have to find a model for calculating prior probabilities. The principle has to be well validated by empirical studies if we want to make our claim scientific. The principle we'll use is that, all else being equal, the relative prior probability of an explanation that accounts for all phenomena is inversely proportional to the number of assumptions that explanation makes. This is a principle colloquially known as Occam's razor. And this principle isn't just a philosophical principle, but is in fact a scientific model that has been validated on numerous occasions under multiple formalizations. See here. Now, what do we mean by assumption? By assumption, we mean an unknown that we need to posit as true for the hypothesis. The fewer of those assumptions, the more parsimonious we say the explanation is. Two object classes are less parsimonious than one class if one will do, and two objects in the same class are less parsimonious than one object in that class if one object will do. So, it would help if we would get a bit more formal. I'm going to define parsimony as that if we have a set of phenomena, S, and a set of explanations, E, a given explanation, H, is an element of the set of parsimonious explanations, P, only if H can account for all phenomena in a set, and H has the fewest number of assumptions. So, for all E that are elements in the set of explanations, the number of assumptions, A of E, has a global minimum of A of H. And this is just the definition of parsimony. Premise 2 is going to be our definition for Occam's razor. The probability of an explanation, E, PP of E, has a global maximum at explanation H if H is an element in the parsimonious set. This is just the definition again of Occam's razor. Premise 3. There are only four possible explanations for the phenomenal universe. Materialism, which posits that matter is the basis of existence. Idealism, which posits that mind is the basis for existence. Dualism, which posits that both mind and matter equally exist and equally form the basis of reality. Or some form of quintessentialism, where neither mind nor matter exist, but some additional unknown thing is the basis for phenomena. Either matter or matter and mind, or neither matter nor mind. Stated like this is a tautology of logical exhaustion. I'm presenting the truth table here. Feel free to pause the video and prove this to yourself. Step 4. Let's begin to calculate the number of assumptions each of our explanations need to make. Let's be charitable and only consider the versions of each account that already assume the minimal number of assumptions. We won't force materialism to assume the mind-boggling number of particles it usually does. We'll let them attribute matter, time, and space as to a single entity, along the lines of something like M theory. Likewise, we will dispense with multiple minds idealism. Each explanation will make two assumptions: that a certain class of objects exist, and that only one object exists in each class. Thus, materialism, idealism, and quintessentialism all have an assumption value of 2. But dualism has an assumption value of 4. It has to posit that both mind and matter exist, and that there is one object in each of those classes. Based on this, we should reject dualism as the least rational possible outcome. I realize that some people who've clicked on this video, theologically orthodox Christians, who accept dualism. Dualism is the least rational position of all the four explanations. But stick around to the end, and maybe your faith will be reconciled with monism. Premise 5, this is the important one. I can be certain that at least one mind exists, my mind, and I don't need to assume the existence of minds as a class. Thus, materialism and quintessentialism both have two assumptions, but now idealism only has one assumption, that only one mind exists. Thus, again, idealism has the fewest assumptions, and assuming idealism can explain everything, it's the most likely explanation for all phenomena. On its own, this is a huge result. Like, our default assumption should be that any physical phenomena is the property of our minds, or of some mind. But I promised the parsimony of God. Let's take a look at the two idealist models, solipsism and emanationism. Solipsism says that my mind is the only thing that exists, and everything else is a creation of my mind. The problem with solipsism is that it fails to account for modalism. That is, why does the present contingent arrangement of phenomena occur rather than another contingent arrangement? Therefore, solipsism should be excluded from the set of parsimonious explanations because it cannot provide a sufficient explanation for modalism. Emanation posits that there is a single, absolute mind that iterates through all logically possible states of mind, either consecutively or concurrently. My mind is an instantiation of the absolute mind, as is yours, as is every phenomena across a potential multiverse. Emanationism, therefore, can account for phenomena with modalism and with the fewest assumptions. This absolute mind concept not only is a plausible definition for God, but it is the definition of God for Hindus, Mahayana Buddhists, some Taoists, many Shia Muslims, Gnostic Christians, Kabbalistic Judaism, Christian Science, and my own tradition, Theosophy. This is Plato's God. Wrapping this up then, the emanationist God can account for all phenomena in the phenomenal universe. The emanationist God requires the fewest assumptions. Premise 5. From premise 1, 7 and 8, the emanationist God is an element of P. From 2, the emanationist God has the highest prior probability of all candidate explanations for the phenomenal universe. Thus, God is the most likely explanation for the phenomenal universe. Thus, God is more likely to exist than not, and the belief in God is rational. And because Occam's razor isn't just a philosophical principle, but a well-validated scientific model, the belief in the emanationist God is also scientific. Quod erat demonstrandum. Obligatory YouTube pandering here. Thanks for watching, and take care, everybody.